is going on, everyone? Welcome to another very exciting episode right here on the Migardener channel. This episode was shamelessly brought to you by migardener.com, the best place to get heirloom, organic, and non-GMO seeds. But with that out of the way, we're not talking about that. We're talking about compost and why your compost is taking longer than it should, or longer than you want it to. Compost will happen regardless if you want it to or not. And we get a lot of questions about people. We get a lot of, questions from people that will say, Luke, how can I speed up my compost? Or Luke, why does your compost only take 3 to 5 months, whereas mine takes 9 months to 12 months or even longer? So there's a lot of questions and concern around the speed at which compost happens. But also there's another, another group of people that say, Luke, I am failing with my compost. I can't get it to decompose. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. And I would simply say to you, number one, there is no failure with composting. Compost will happen regardless if you want it to or not. If I let this pile just sit here for 2 or 3 years, eventually it will decompose. Decomposition happens naturally, so it's not something it's not success versus failure. At the end of the day, you're going to end up with compost, which is the end goal. But it's the speed at which you get the compost that a lot of people kind of gauge their success, right? Their air quotes here, their success. All right, and really quick, before I get this comment, I know it's gonna seem crazy that I'm out here in a t-shirt, but it's amazing today. It's like 62 degrees, and with the sun out, it feels even warmer. So I said, you know what? As crazy as it's gonna seem to be out here in almost December in a t-shirt, there's not gonna be too many more nice days like this. So I'm gonna take advantage of it and soak up all that beautiful vitamin D while I can. But the first thing I wanted to talk about was the types of compost that you can have, because there are different types of compost. Compost is compost, but what's your goal with the compost? Is your goal to use the compost as a growing medium, or is your goal to use the compost as a fertilizer? And there's a big difference, and why that question matters is because based on what your goal is really going to define what you should be composting and how much of it you should be composting. Now, where I'm getting at with this is that when you have compost, you could take things like animal manure, right? Animal manure, when it's composted, is super, super high in nutrients. It's very fertile, but it makes a very poor growing medium. You know, as I've always said, there is, you can take poor quality soil and you can fertilize it and you can grow plants in poor quality soil, but it's not going to be a long-term fix. It's not actually gonna fix the soil. On the flip side, if you want a better growing medium, sometimes the better growing mediums don't have as many nutrients. They will have some, but again, if we're comparing apples to apples, fertilizers have way more nutrients. Growing mediums have way more humus. Humus is this beautiful fluffy byproduct of decomposition. And so for me, I like to go for more humus than nutrients. Now, like I said, you will get nutrients from decomposition regardless of what you're decomposing. So don't get that confused. But it's really important because the next thing is, based on your goals, would define how much of each thing you want to put into your compost pile. So if I'm looking for a really good fertilizer, let's say I already have beautiful soil and I want to fertilize more, I'm going to use more things that are high in nitrogen or high in nutrients. Things like manures, whether that's cow manure, chicken manure, goat manure, rabbit manure, it doesn't matter. Things like grass clippings, food scraps, those are also going to have lots of nitrogen in them. Things like coffee grounds, very high in nitrogen, right? All those are very, very high in fertility, but they don't all make the best growing medium. If you're looking for more of a growing medium, you want to go something along the lines of like wood chips, right? You're going to be breaking down wood chips or leaf matter, right? Mulched up leaves, or even like yard scraps, things like that. That's going to have more carbon in it. More carbon is kind of the backbone. It's the structure. It's the skeleton, if you will, of the soil. And so because you're going for something that's more of a growing medium, you want to have something that's going to have more body to it. It's not going to just deflate. Nitrogen-rich products, nitrogen-rich ingredients, they deflate. And so if you're looking for fluffy soil, if you're looking for a good growing medium, you don't want things that deflate. You want things that hold their volume, their fluff. The second thing about compost is the speed at which they break down. So if you're looking for a very fertile compost, that's going to be something that's high in nutrients. That's going to be something that's going to break down very quickly. If you have lots of nitrogen in your compost pile, lots of greens, lots of food scraps, manures and stuff like that, those will break down much quicker because the bacteria in your compost, check it out, the bacteria in your compost is actually what uses the nitrogen. This is a process called nitrogen sequestration. What the bacteria will do is it'll actually steal the nitrogen and say, I need that. And it will begin to use the nitrogen to break down the other organic matter. When the material is completely broken down, the nitrogen will be released back into the compost. But they use it temporarily as kind of a food source, if you will. And so because the bacteria use the nitrogen, the more nitrogen you have, the faster it'll break down. I don't necessarily aim for a very fast breakdown process. That's why things like wood chips, they don't break down very fast because they're high in carbon, not high in nitrogen. My compost pile generally will take about 3 to 5 months to fully break down. And that's because I use things that will help to speed up the breakdown process without being mostly high nitrogen products. So where I'm getting at is if you want your compost pile to break down very quickly, say in about like a month to 3 months, 1 to 3 months is not uncommon if you have lots of nitrogen. However, I like to go with about 5 parts brown material to only about 2 or 3 parts green material. That means I have more carbon than I do nitrogen. But flip it, if you want it to break down really quickly, you're going to use more nitrogen than you do carbon. The third thing that is worth noting with compost is the size of the particles. This is so important. If you want your compost to break down faster, make sure that they're more mulched up. If you just take, leaves like this, right, and pile them together, well, what happens? They will break down, but they sandwich together, they stack up, and they stack up on themselves. And what that does is it actually reduces the amount of air or oxygen in your compost. It actually goes anaerobic. Even though you don't have lots of nitrogen to make it kind of methane-y, you will get a methane-y smell because there's no air. And the only bacteria that can survive in a no air environment is anaerobic. Anaerobic means without oxygen. And so you can you can slow down your compost pile by having big material that just collapses in on itself and it isn't nice and chunky and broken up. The more it's broken up, the more surface area you have, and the more surface area you have, the more air you're gonna have, and the more air you're gonna have means the more bacteria you can facilitate, and the more bacteria you can facilitate, the faster it's gonna break down. So even if you have lots of carbon, which breaks down slower than nitrogen, the more oxygen you have means the faster it can break down. And obviously it will break down at a certain rate, but like our compost pile right here, it takes about 3 to 5 months for it to fully break down. And that's relatively fast for a primarily carbon-based compost. So just keep that in mind that the more you can mulch it up, the better. All of our things like wood chips, if I can find some. Here's some at the edge of our compost here that wasn't quite broken down, but you'll notice it's chunky, right? It's chunky. Chunky is really good because if you just take a stick, right, this little twig has really little surface area. But now I've doubled the surface area. I don't know, my math's not great, but I've like quadrupled the surface area, right? I've, 16x'd the surface area. And you keep going, right? The more you break this down, the faster it's gonna break down. And the more air can get in between here. And it's as simple as that. The more air you have, the faster it's gonna break down. Now you can help break down, or you can help increase aeration in your compost by flipping it, and that's gonna help the breakdown process. So what we do is about every other week or so, we come out here, just give it a gentle flip. I'll come out here and I'll do one of these, right? I'll flip it. And when I flip it, I'm actually refluffing it and I'm trapping air in the compost. So all of that beautiful aerobic bacteria or oxygen-loving bacteria, they're all gonna say, man, let's go, let's get after it, and they start breaking down faster. That is actually why your compost heats up. The heating up of the compost is because of the activity, right? You sweat when you exercise, you get hot when you exercise. That's the same thing that happens inside your compost. Your compost heats up because of all that aerobic activity. And so, you know, the faster faster they are working in your compost means the faster your compost is going to break down. All right, and the fourth thing that we want to talk about with speeding up your compost is moisture. So moisture is a key to breaking down because bacteria are a living, breathing thing just like you and I are. And bacteria is responsible for the breaking down process. If your compost is taking too long to break down, check the moisture. However, too much moisture ends up like a swamp. Too much water actually will lead the bacteria to go anaerobic because the water turns into a swamp. You know, air does not actually go that well into water, right? Water and air don't really mix all that well. And so because of that, the water fills up all the air gaps and it displaces the oxygen. So the bacteria go anaerobic. And anaerobic takes a whole lot longer and you get more of that methane-y smell. Think swamp or a marsh, right? That is a lot of water and a lot of organic material, but it's too much water. And so it just begins to turn stagnant and it smells. But not enough water basically means that, you know, there's just not enough water for the bacteria to thrive. And so having kind of the Goldilocks example, you know, not too much or not too little, just right, can help you to actually facilitate and encourage that breaking down process of your compost. So what I like to go for, as you'll notice with my compost is, I mean, it's the best compost I've ever had. This is absolutely incredible looking stuff. But if I squeeze it, there's not any water just dripping out. It's not saturated, but you'll notice it holds its shape. It holds its shape. It also has a nice dark color. The dark color is the presence of moisture. If I let this dry out, bone dry, it'd be like a lighter brown or even like a light gray color, right? So you don't want it to change color. Any light color where it starts to turn lighter. So like if I look at, right? This is all unbroken down. It was on the edge of the compost pile where it wasn't really part of the overall pile. You'll notice the color difference and the fact that it's not broken down as much. This is not broken down as much because it's really dry. If it was wetter, it probably would have broken down a whole lot more. But if you look at the center of this pile here, the center of the pile is beautiful. It's absolutely incredible. It's dark, it's rich, and it smells like a forest floor. It doesn't smell like a swamp. And that's because I make sure that there's enough moisture in here to facilitate that breaking down process. I can't tell you how much is the right amount because that's based on the size of your compost pile. I've always said just treat it like a damp sponge. If you take a dish sponge, just put it under the water and then wring it out until you can't get any more drips. You'll notice it's still damp to the touch, but it's not dripping wet. That's what you should feel with this compost. That's the best kind of that's the best visual example I can give you, and one that you can try at home so you kind of know what is ideal and what is too much and what is too little. And that's all I got for you today. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you learned something new. As always, if you did enjoy, make sure to throw a like up there. Subscribe if you're not yet already, and make sure to check out migardener.com. I'd highly recommend checking it out. We have over 650 different varieties of vegetable seeds, so there's definitely something out there for everybody. But I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you learned something new. And as always, this is Luke from the Migardener channel, reminding you to grow big or go home, and we'll catch you all on the next episode. All right, grow big or go home, everyone. Bye.